What was the biggest scandal in your high school? Story 1. Not my high school but my wife's. Every year the final year students equivalent to senior I guess. This is in New Zealand. Would always organize a school prank. It was a tradition and usually pretty harmless. But one year, they got some petrol gasoline and used it to draw an enormous in the soccer field. Petrol kills grass so it's easily visible from the air, where the school principal saw it while flying into the city. It was on Google Maps satellite view for years. Absolutely beautiful. Story 2. Kid known as the mad shitter defecated everywhere but in toilets. All boys prep school. Kid's behavior just kept escalating. Floor of a stall, bathroom radiator, empty classroom, stairwell. Dean of students was getting increasingly pissed yelling at us over PA daily. It all came down when he inside a piano in the music room and got caught on camera. His rich parents donated a new grand piano and he wasn't even expelled. Story 3. English teacher was somehow passing a girl who only showed up for 30 of the classes. Nothing was said aloud but then they caught her leaving in his car one day, so you can imagine what was going on. He was fired. The parents pulled the girl from the school and we never saw her again. Can't even find her on socials. Story 4. The son of one of the teachers odd on DXM one day and had to be removed via ambulance. He was out from school for a bit, but then literally the first day he was back he odd again and had to have an ambulance called again. Story 5. Middle school music teacher diddling kids. Promoted to the high school and it all came out a couple years later. There were victims that moved to the high school when he did, currently in prison. Story 6. There were several, but my favorite was my freshman year. The senior class prank was somehow they broke into the school overnight and covered all the floors with cooking oil. When I got to school that day everyone was outside waiting and no one knew exactly what was going on, but all the doors were still locked. But I got to a window just in time to see a janitor fall on his rear and other school officials struggling to keep their balance. The principal came out and told everyone about the prank and oil and that there was simply no way of opening the school that day, so we all went back home. He did ask all seniors though to stick around and called all senior parents and basically blamed all of them and told them they were going to help clean it up. Turns out the only way to open the school the next day was to buy hundreds of pounds of kitty litter, and the seniors helped to spread it out in the hallways to soak up the oil and make it walkable. So for the rest of the week we were walking on kitty litter, and then they brought in a professional cleaning crew on the weekend to haul out the kitty litter and use chemicals to get rid of any lingering oil. It was still slippery for months after that. The principal wanted to press charges for vandalism and tried to get anyone to admit who was responsible, even going so far as threatening to cancel graduation, but no one talked and he finally just had to let it go. Story 7. A girl got pregnant and refused to tell anyone who the father was. It would have been way less of a scandal if she had told and it was just some other guy. About a decade later she married her best friend's father. That means she, at 26, married a 52-year-old. People now sort of assume she got knocked up by him and they eventually decided to make things official, but they've never admitted to it. Story 8. Kids my older bro's age were scanning 20s and using them to buy lunch. This was when scanners first came out. Apparently they scanned two sides and glued them together. One day the lunch lady pulled them apart and they were busted. Secret Service came and confiscated all their computers and such. Story 9. Well, my school in Denmark once got a bomb threat. The police then came in with big dogs. They then later found out that it was a little kid that had zero connection with the school and he had just searched school's phone numbers and picked the first one. Story 10. Quite a few band teacher slept with a student teacher got caught looking up toys on his work PC. His wife was a teacher also at the school. Teacher was fired for allegedly assaulting a female student. Story 11. The football coach athletic director got fired for supplying students with steroids. A local cop had to quit the force because he got caught having with a minor student. A young girl got kidnapped, raped, murdered, and left in a cornfield. Local cops completely fed the crime scene so no one ever got caught. Still miss you, Tara. The 80s were messy to say the least, even in the small town I lived in. Story 12 was me. Friend's dad killed himself because he had been me for years and I told his wife. He had me fooled on a lot of things. I'm doing better now but it was a tough time. Story 13. One of our high school teachers getting divorced partway through the year, then marrying one of his students the month after she graduated, or the fact that 7 of the 9 seniors on the varsity wrestling team either had kids or had one on the way. Story 14. The SRO's daughter killed herself and the rumor was because he wouldn't let her be with a black man. Also we had a student murdered and found in the dumpster across the street from the school, and it was his brother that killed him. Story 15. A girl in my year level, her dad had a psychotic break, stabbed the mom and carved a Z in her face, then came to school looking for the girl. We went into lockdown. Story 16. The librarian was grooming and sleeping with sophomores 15 to 16 years old. I actually was one of the grooming victims but I was far too lesbian to even notice that's what it was until after he was outed and arrested. Story 17. History teacher was caught filming girls at an Old Navy. I had him, he looked exactly how you'd imagine. His daughter also attended the school. I felt so bad for her. Story 18. The girls' soccer coach was banging this girl who became suicidal, but the coach wanted to leave after our best season even after my dad's friends left him a big TV. Story 19. The high school I went to was private in the South. Half for kids of parents who paid the tuition. BC it was a college prep school and half for the legacy status symbol of it all, so they had regular classes and then honors and AP for the striving bunch. A group of juniors stole the final exam for the regular English class. It was like two legacy status symbol girls and a legacy status symbol boy, and then my neighbor part of the striving crowd. I too was a striver, and my parents made a lot of financial sacrifices to send me to the school. They stole the exam and went to Kinko's BC. This was around 2010 when people didn't always have printers or copiers at home. They left the exam on the copier. Our high school principal got a call from Kinko's Love at BC. I just know these kids were likely to the manager, and so he shows up with a high school yearbook to have them identified. Only the striver neighborhood kid was expelled. Mind you, the school makes a huge deal about having an honor code. Of course the legacy status symbol girls weren't allowed to be head cheerleader and I think the legacy boy was barred from some clubs or extracurriculars, but it was definitely a message of like, hey, if your parents went here, you'll get preferential treatment, and TBH that message was just a lesson for the real world. Story 20 kid in my class died during our junior year, fell down some steps at a party and hit his head. Nobody was around when it happened, so when they found him unconscious on the floor, they assumed he had passed out from drinking. Shittiest part of the coincidence around it all was that this guy was known for sleeping in odd places at parties when he had too much to drink, and he was known to be a very heavy sleeper. When the other kids found him, nothing about the situation raised any eyebrows. It wasn't until the next morning that anyone realized anything was wrong when he wouldn't wake up. He was declared brain dead that night, and he was taken off life support a couple days later. In the end, nobody got into any trouble that I can remember, but it was certainly a stain on my otherwise pleasant time in high school. Story 21 A recent graduate from our HS apparently cut off his own mother's head and sat on the porch waiting for the police to show up while covered in her blood. Story 22 Middle school. Girl murdered her parents. Her name alphabetically was next to mine, so my picture was on the news a lot as they did not pan in tight enough in the yearbook. We never saw her again. Story 23 Not me, but my partner went to the elementary school where Mary Kay Letourneau taught. Because of all the media, they were given the option to be bused to another school across town. Story 24 My friend had her nudes leaked, as in pictures in a bra and a cardigan while other girls posted bikini pictures. Nobody made a big deal out of my friend getting raped by her ex in the bathroom or my ex-friend raping two girls. No consequences, just some nudes. Story October 25th of freshman year, freshman girl gets pregnant. I went to Catholic school, so this was obviously a huge no-no. The girl talked to her friend B about the situation and B gave her a pill to abort the fetus, but it took it in the bathroom during a class and left the packaging in the trash. A got suspended and B got expelled, even though she was just trying to help a friend and otherwise wasn't involved at all. The baby daddy OFC didn't get in any trouble. Story 26 ROTC teacher hooked up with a student in the classroom during a Friday night football game. Kids walk in and take a video of it and it gets leaked to everyone in the school. Guy went to jail and eventually divorced his wife and remarried the student when he got out. Don't know how long they were married for. Story 27 Take your pick I suppose. The kid that blew his head off because of bullying. The alleged gang rape of the cheerleader squad by the entire senior football team. Big coincidence multiple of them got pregnant and had to quit switch school. One killed herself. The phrase boys will be boys was said a lot around this time. The alleged raping of high school girls by the local police. They'd wait around city limits on the weekends and fish for high school girls with new licenses permits and shake them down for favors or underage guys with beer and take the beer. The school hiring the local cop that got fired for trying to smuggle in cocaine to the tiny local airport. Put him in charge of school security. Small Midwestern towns are cesspools of disgusting like this. Story 28 Teacher married a teen student. He was about 40 at the time. Also, some teachers made a fat teen girl strip in the staff room because they thought she was pregnant. Story 29 My comp sci teacher was giving a presentation and accidentally showed a picture he took of himself naked in front of the class. He went and reported the incident to the office and a police investigation was launched. During the investigation, he had to turn in all his computers and hard drive. When the police checked the hard drive, they found something else. Apparently the comp sci teacher would house sit for the principal while she's away on vacation. While she was away, he would often broke into her house, took out her underwear and undergarments, and took pictures of them. Story 30 Our forensic science teacher got caught and arrested for possession of really awful pornography, and blamed his divorce for resorting to said pornography as a coping mechanism. Story 31 Grew up Mormon. Kid I used to go to church with. One day he stopped going to church and seminary at school with. A few months later we found out this happened. Story 32 AX geography teacher was arrested for giving an underage girl alcohol, condoms and keys to his house. Police investigated his house and classroom and found illegal vile stuff on his computer and found a file in his classroom called Leisure Folder where he took images of underage girls' skirts and stuff. He was fired and is now in jail and the headmaster was fired because he knew about it and didn't do anything. I hope he rots in jail. Story 33 Not a scandal, but legend. A few years before me 1985-ish. A kid rode his motorcycle down the hallway. My brother was in high school then. I think the story was it was last few days of senior year. And kind off a bet, friends opened the doors, he casually rode through and out the other side. People have written about it on the HSFB page. One said it was about the loudest thing he'd ever heard due to the echo's reverberation. Years later 2010, a motivational speaker type was going off about how he was a pro athlete, and ruined his life through drugs, found Christ, all this and that. Well, it was around the time smartphones were newer, And he didn't anticipate that. Some kids Googled him, and turns out he was a subpar minor league baseball player, was never much of a prospect, played at some mediocre college with below-average stats, was all right there for them to fact-check. They started passing it around and a teacher got wind of it, but they told them this guy's lying to us. Word spread and I think the teachers went to the principal and they shut it down. Story 34. Several freshman girls were divergenized by junior-senior guys at an overnight away track meet. The only girl that didn't give in that night told her mom and all broke loose. That girl ended up switching schools because she got totally bullied and ostracized. Story 35. We had a narc. His backstory was that his family was from another state, but he was planning to go to college here so he wanted to be here before college. So his parents got him an apartment, to live by himself, in another state. Haha, he was in a lot of my classes. He seemed like he was pretty smart but just didn't really care at all about tests or assignments. He would have parties at his apartment where people would drink and smoke. People openly referred to him as a narc and laughed and he'd laugh along with it. It was a place to party so people just went anyway. This went on for 3 to 4 months. One day they started announcing groups of names to come to the principal's office. This seemingly went on all day so obviously everyone was confused and talking. Apparently he had cameras hidden in his apartment and had been keeping track of names. Essentially anyone who had drank or smoked up at his apartment was on the list and told they were being kicked off any and all extracurricular activities, sports, band, etc. Some of the rich parents of kids on the list hired attorneys and were fighting back over entrapment. Ultimately nothing happened. It was just laughable how much money the school wasted trying to bust kids for drinking and smoking. Also someone eventually found the narc's picture in a yearbook. He had graduated just 3 years earlier from a different HS just 20 miles away. This was before social media. If it happened today, someone would have found out exactly who he was within a couple days of the narc suddenly showing up with a ridiculous backstory. Story 36. A married couple taught at our high school, and the husband was messing around with one of his students. The couple got divorced but both continued to teach at the same school. The male teacher married the student after graduation, and rumor had it that a fistfight broke out at the wedding. Story 37 had plenty, but the first one that came to my mind was that our track coaches held parties. Their daughter and son were on the team at their house for the track team after track meets, and would allow students to drink alcohol. This was a known thing, but eventually it was confronted, and in the end it was swept under the rug because the track team was doing extremely well as they always had with those coaches. Their children were elite runners. Story 38. There were a few teachers sleeping with underage students in high school, and it was always fairly obvious because it was the teachers everyone liked. Story 39. About half of the kids in my class decided to do a senior skip day and just didn't show up to school. The other half went to school as normal, and the half that skipped got into a lot of trouble. They were pissed at the fact that people decided to go to school on the day they decided to skip. Of course, with it being a small town and our class only being 21 people, well 22, but one of the guys tragically lost his life in a car accident 2 months before graduation. The 10 people who skipped class were all related and are in the in-group, and those of us who went to school were actually just not told we were supposed to skip at all. Story 40. Principal was sleeping with taking advantage of a girl in the senior class. She was 16-17, still a minor, and got her pregnant. Girl left the school before anyone found out. Few years later, when she was around 21 to 22, she reports everything to law enforcement. He was arrested on school grounds. Everyone in the city knew and still talk about it. This was over 10 years ago. Story 41. So much happened my 4 years in HS that nothing was really shocking after a certain point. People smashing in various places. Drug busts as in students getting caught in the bathroom doing various drugs. Usually not weed, numerous pregnancies, really bad fights, hospitalizations. There was just a lot going on. The school I went to wasn't even considered the worst school out of the ones in my district. I'd say the most memorable scandal was my freshman year, where one of the English teachers was sleeping with a few of the students. Most of us knew, as of course the boys bragged about it so it spread. But she was there the whole school year, half our sophomore year. I actually don't know if the school or law enforcement found out she was fired or if she voluntarily left before they found out. Till this day I haven't heard of her ever having been reprimanded. Story 42. In year 10 we got a new headmaster. 3 years after I left, my sister went to the same school. He was arrested as he had faked all his documents and wasn't even a teacher. Shame, as he was a really nice guy. Probably how they found out he wasn't a real teacher. Story 43. 14-year-old boy was beaten to death by Nazis. His sister killed herself 2 weeks later. Absurdly, the suicide of his sister made way bigger waves than him being murdered. There's a concert every year in the town's church for her. I really think that's beautiful, but it makes me sad how literally no one remembers her brother's name. Could never really wrap my head around this. Story 44. Physics teacher and gym teacher busted in a hotel room with 2 students, having a little party. Both teachers were fired immediately. Was the talk of the school for at least a decade. Story 45. Some guy had a threesome, his twin half-sisters. He got moved away and the whole school got a handout to give to our parents about sibling abuse. Interestingly, one of the sisters went on to have a successful modeling career in NYC. Story 46. When I was in high school, a girl and a guy were together for like 3 years. She actually lived with him and his family. As soon as she turned 18, his dad left his mom and ran off with her. They were together for like 3 or 4 months. It was a big deal. His parents had young children together. Needless to say, there was a lot of drama surrounding it. It ultimately ended with the dad killing himself, and the boy and girl ended up getting back together a few years later, and she lives with his family again like nothing ever happened. Story 47. Oh goodness, I have a list. My high school was 7 to 12, so when the 7th grade girls would come in with their grown-up bodies, the 11th and 12th graders were foaming at the mouth. One of my classmates got caught in the home economics building getting her back beat in. We're still unsure of how many abortions she had in high school. One guy had 2 girlfriends in the same grade, dated them both at the same time for 5 years. The football coach wanted all the underage girls. I went to a predominantly black high school, and our basketball coach was white, and one day she was waxing the gym floor and made a comment that she was doing the work. She was fired. Story 48. School was on national news 4 times for racism incidents, including star athletes doing blackface, as well as the baseball team harassing a local gay couple and vandalizing their home. Story 49. Where to start? Principal was raking in 6 figures going to London at least twice a year and driving a luxury car. She quit after the next scandal, but it was heavily implied she was embezzling money the school had received to rebuild after the hurricane. For 2 years classes were held in trailers and in the ruins of the school with kids who were homeless or without while she was living it up in London. She was silently moved to the board of directors. A teacher was arrested for corrupting a minor. I forget the charges. He had been warned by another teacher not to be so involved, and he kept hanging out with the kids anyways. The teacher was arrested after one girl was bragging with sleeping with him and that he gave her weed. It was kept under wraps until she told me what happened and seemed proud. She couldn't understand why she had to go to therapy, court ordered, and felt nothing for him getting arrested. Shitty guy but also shitty girl. Might add more if I can think of them, cause in trying not to conflate the horror stories with the scandals. Story 50. The varsity soccer team were running trains on a couple of cheerleaders. 2 coaches caught them in the act. Some were expelled, some suspended. All involved were taken off the teams. It's how I made varsity as a freshman so quickly. Story 51. Not biggest, but my personal favorite. Dude got suspended for Color Day, our school spirit day, and showed up to an assembly with all 1,600 students in a full-body penis costume and proceeded to run circles around the gym. It was awesome. Story 52. We had a few girls get pregnant, but probably multiple teacher-student affairs. I realized that grooming is grooming and it probably would have negatively impacted my life, but one of the teachers was so hot and I was definitely envious. Story 53. Late 90s. We had a couple girls get pregnant. It wasn't so scandalous by that time, but still frowned upon. One couple immediately split up. The other couple have been together since sophomore year. We had one kid get shot in the head. The kids that were there with him wrapped his head in a towel and stuck him in the closet. The story is this kid found a revolver and it was his idea to play Russian roulette. The other kids freaked out and hid the body. That's the story at least. Story 54. One of the coaches who I've known since I was 4 got arrested for child abuse as well as sending pics to underage girls. While holding his new baby in some of the pics, his wife was my favorite teacher ever. She was an English teacher and always used my papers as examples. My school was a horrible private Christian school, so obviously the whole deal was swept under the rug and anyone who talked about it got in trouble. She moved away and I haven't heard from her since. Oh, and the coach got bailed out. Story 55. 3 or 4 kids were in their grandparents' barn and decided to build a pipe bomb. Farms sometimes have dynamite for tree trunk removal or other purposes, so they pack the pipe and screw on the end caps and they realize they don't have a way to insert the fuse. So they take the assembled pipe bomb to the drill press to make a hole and it blew up, killing all but one instantly. The one that lived died 2 days later. Everyone was so sad for them. One of them wanted to be a doctor, blah blah blah. I knew them personally and they were and didn't have the grades to be a doctor. Story 56. My high school's biggest scandal was when a teacher and a student were caught texting about test answers. The whole thing felt like a crime thriller until we realized it was just about algebra. Story 57. I got this one. So, in my sophomore year of HS we had a laundry list of problems. Bullying was rampant. It wasn't the fun kind either, like where you get beat up or shoved into lockers. No, this was 2012, where people were doing online bullying. They were telling other kids to 86 themselves. I got hit with it by the popular kids all that year. On top of that, the freshman class was as dumb as dirt. Around 80% of that class failed the second semester, so our dean falsified the test scores so they would pass. She got caught and quit before they could press charges. But the next year, she became the principal at a public HS and then did the exact same thing. She got charged that time and is no longer allowed to teach in NC anymore. The real fun problem was when we got SWAT. Around the same time as all the other BS, the head popular guy, let's call him Danny, got dethroned. Someone had said that he had a tiny penis. Then this game of telephone started, where the rumor got so out of hand and embellished that by the time it reached the popular kids, the damage was done. Rumor has it though that when he went to have for the first time, he did in fact have that problem. So right after, his girlfriend dumped him, then there was a power vacuum. So when all of these factors came into play, the entire sophomore hall erupted into extreme violence. It got so bad that the freshman and sophomore building got locked down by the cops. They dragged everyone outside and locked the school down for hours. They arrested the people that were fighting. 90% of the kids who got arrested were the popular kids. Then they all had to do court-ordered community service all summer. But the cherry on top was the dean. After she got canned, her last day on campus ended with a hobo slashing her throat. She survived obviously, but boy howdy was that riot for the rest of the year. Story 58. God, I can't pick. Was it the popular kid getting gut shot while selling drugs to his friend, the vice principal embezzling money, the giant Confederate flag on the gym being covered in paint 2001, the counterfeit ring run out of the agriculture class, all with only 1K students for the entire county? Rural life is wild. Story 59. Two kids were street racing in my HS. One bumped the other, and they went off-road into a pole, killed both kids in car. Kid who bumped the car didn't turn himself in for a while, but eventually did. Story 60. I think about this one a lot these past few years. When I was a junior, we elected the class burnout as class president on a lark the next day. He came to school drunk, and the administration stepped in to nix the results. I live in America. I'm only half joking when I say that I wish we had some adults to step in and clean up the mess like they did when we were in high school. Story 61. We had like 12 kids score perfect scores on the SATs my senior year. It was unheard of, so the school district called foul play. All 12 kids had to take the test again, and all 12 kids scored perfect scores again. Story 62. It was after I left, but I think there was a bigweed scandal that got half the football team kicked and the head coach fired. My school was one of those football is life schools, so it was kind of a big deal. There were plenty of student-teacher scandals, but those rarely made it to big news. Story 63. Kid who was a bully and expelled midway through high school reappeared end of final year and lured two girls out to an elementary school nearby late at night demanding money. Or, younger brother assaulted a girl passed out drunk in a nightclub a year later. They had a sister too. SMH. Story 64. When I was a senior 2007-2008, a group of popular kids and jocks that were principal office aides, overcharged for senior class apparel and pocketed the difference. When this broke, the senior principal had a big sit-down with the graduating class and told us it was only by one, and if we were that concerned, she'd donate the money to charity. Well, it came out they were overcharging by something like 3 to 5. I don't think they faced any kind of repercussions. I think it was really shitty that because they were all popular kids and athletes, they got away with it. Story 65. We had a lockdown BC. A few kids from the school went and killed someone. Then they couldn't locate the kids. Eventually they found them and the lockdown was lifted. It was a girl and two guys, and they used swords to slash the out of her dad's stepdad who had been abusing her. Story 66. A male P.E. teacher asked a male student for an inappropriate act. When the principal found out, he severely beat the teacher before calling the police. I remember the school staff trying to stop him from taking the law into his own hands. His words still echo in my mind. Every student in my school is like my own child. How would you feel if this happened to your kid? This whole thing happened during school break. Story 67. Very bad car accident. Senior drunk driving and killed two classmates. Coach sleeping with student fake ID brought on senior trip. You can just imagine. Story 68. 1985. A young choir teacher female was caught in an affair with a HS freshman girl. I was in a wedding a couple of years later. The girl was one of the bridesmaids and was gorgeous. Story 69. Principal was caught cyberbullying one of the students. Turned out to be one of the biggest catfish child abusers in the world with 3,000 victims to his name. One of the girls he targeted died. Story 70. At a high school in North Carolina, a young 25-year-old male soccer coach was having statutory rape with one of his underage female players. And they usually did it when they were on the road for away games. That's a huge scandal, but when the girl's parents found out, they pressed separate charges in every county in which rape occurred. Story 71. This poor girl had a bucket of pig's blood dropped on her head at homecoming. Everyone started laughing. She then began to lose her, setting the place on fire and slamming the doors shut with her mind, locking people in. Story 72. One guy shot up another guy with heroin in the locker room. This alone was obviously a major scandal, especially in an uppity white suburban town. And then a few years later, the shooter-upper eventually went on to murder his drug dealer over an ounce of weed and is currently serving a life sentence. Story 73. 7. A chicken biscuit. No further explanation. Go look it up on Urban Dictionary. Edit. To be clear, my school was the one who made that up for an incident. Story 74. Some kid kept stealing another kid's lunch every day. He got fed up, so he jerked off into his sandwich. You can probably see where this is going. I don't know how he got caught, but he was suspended. Story 75. One of the male teachers slept with the wife of another teacher. The wife became pregnant and gave birth to a son. The not-husband teacher had a really unique look. The son inherited the look. Father and son were like identical twins. At my time at the school, the boy was about my age. I had classes with him. Both male teachers still teaching. They both teached him too. He sat there in class, looking like Mr. S, but called T like his marital father. Everybody knew it was kind of awkward, and a very big, but all parties handled it very well. There was no war between the teachers anymore. The boy knew what has happened before his birth, and he was a beloved child by his marital, legal parents, and even his biological father played a healthy role in his life. And because the adults handled it so well, there was respect amongst all of the students, teachers, and parents. His legal father was a wise, intelligent, caring, and decent man. Nobody ever imagined laughing about him. His decency taught everybody to have respect, because of his forgiveness and love for his family. But sitting in class with that boy and being teached by his biological father, that was awkward AF for me. Story 76. One of our high school teachers hooked up with a new senior girl every year. They would get hotel rooms and everything. He wasn't even subtle about it. Story 77. My gym teacher in high school was having a long-term relationship with an 8th grader he coached in the middle school. I wonder where Mr. T is these days since he's probably out of prison by now. Story 78. Someone sold illegal copies of Microsoft products and only avoided criminal charges and a civil suit because a teacher was close friends with someone high up in Microsoft. They were still expelled. Story 79. Dude on the football team got benched due to attendance issues. He goes on a coke bender, and with the help of 2 other guys on the team, twin sons of a teacher, they bust the window of the VP in charge of attendance and firebomb his office. But being on coke, they don't think to scatter and watch it burn and get arrested. Dude kicks out the window of the cop car, hops in the front it was left running and takes off. Doesn't get boned. Another cop arriving on the scene in a nearby intersection, breaking the cop's leg. A girl got caught having with 7 other male students in the school sports center construction site. Story 80. When I was a freshman, one of the coaches at my high school posed for Playgirl. That magazine got shared all over school, and he was eventually fired, unfairly imo. I wish I could remember his name, but this was back in 1980 and after partying through the 80s, things are a bit of a blur. Story 81. During the teacher strike a few decades ago, one of our subs flashed to students. I can't recall the details, but it made local news. Sadly, it was not one of my classes. Story 82. Take your pick. Athlete guy secretly videotaped with an unsuspecting young woman, then showed the tape to the rest of the football team, causing what was likely a lifelong trauma for the woman because for the entire school her name was associated with that incident. Male teacher had affair with female student. They fled state and married and divorced. Socially secluded guy got repeatedly caught jerking off in back of classroom or other public places, almost as though he didn't know. What he was doing was abhorrent. Female teacher was caught day drinking to the point of passing out. Students walked in and found her with her face in a puddle of drool on her desk. Love triangle led to 2 male students having a knife fight in parking lot. Both of them were stabbed repeatedly and hospitalized, and several dozen students watched fight and encouraged it. Overly friendly guidance counselor was arrested and convicted for molesting children and having huge stash of child. Female student part of by a large group of athletes. She got pregnant, had baby. She was Catholic, and put it up for adoption. As far as I know, nobody ever found out who the father was. The head boy encouraging juniors to drink alcohol. He had to publicly apologize to the school and was stripped from the role of head boy. He was also one of the most popular people in his year, so it was a bit of an uproar too. A group of 16 to 17-year-olds on a trip to Vietnam got drunk against strict orders. Didn't help that another student, my brother, got badly electrocuted from a faulty outlet on that same trip. 3. A student in my year smeared his all over the boys' bathroom walls, which got him suspended. He came back during the suspension and slashed all the car's tires in the staff parking lot. That got him expelled, and everyone was happy because he was a menace.